We're in my garden here in Houston, and we're picking a plant that grows everywhere in Houston. If you go by the entry ramp to 59, you're going to find this. This is called Amaranth. It's native to Texas and northeastern Mexico. The Tarahumara people in Chihuahua eat this still. This is highly nutritious, vitamins A, B, C, and these little pods will grow into seeds. They're high in protein. This is a very nutritious food that has been tossed out. No one sells it. You can find it only on the streets here in Houston, on sidewalks. They grow out of sidewalk cracks. You have to be careful not to eat those because you don't know what type of chemicals they've been subjected to. So this is an organic garden. I got the seeds, and these are organic plants. I remember from my childhood this being very important to us. We were picking cotton in Robstown, Texas. My mother would trek out into the byways and start picking this, put them in bags, and I remember going with her. Some people call it a weed because some people call it invasive. I call it a healthy grower. And you take the leaves, my mother would take the leaves and then cook it for dinner. And we're gonna cook it today exactly the same way that my mother used to cook it. We'll put some spices in it. The type of vegetable that you would prepare similar to mustard greens, collard greens, and spinach to a lesser extent. Because spinach cooks very quickly, we'll have to cook it with spices and flavorings for about 30 minutes. And luckily, the rains have really helped this sort of sprout really fast. It rained the last 2 days, and this morning was a big rain. The botanic atmosphere environment of Houston is very rich and very nutritious if we take care of it, if we understand it. So it's really a pleasure to be able to cook this way. You know, these plants, they've sustained people living here in Houston for 10,000 years. The people who lived here, their names were Tonkawa and Karankawa. And this is what they ate. And it's highly nutritious, so we can get back to our roots and be very healthy. I'm just gonna cook the leaves, which is what my mother used to do. And it's one of my early childhood memories. It's a very, very particular to the Mexican American community. If you were to interview Mexican Americans who are, let's say, 50 years or older, they will remember this. Everybody knows rosemary. It's wonderful. So I'm just going to take a little bit. That's all I need for the chipotle we're going to make. So this is my giant laurel leaf. Now, I need just one. So we have this huge tree, but I'm gonna take, just one. Maybe another one. They're really great. These, as you know, very aromatic. And you just pop them into a soup, into a gravy. They're very, very nice. Okay. And the dirt will fall to the bottom. That's why I don't pour the water into the colander, because the dirt particles have lain to the bottom, so we want to keep them there. And now this is ready to cook. We're going to cook this with onion and tomato. So let me get the onion and then 3 tomatoes. Now you know how to slice an onion so that you have minimum crying. You need a very sharp knife, of course. And the first thing you do is you peel it, and you can peel it. You can use your fingers, but I like to do it this way. Get the big heavy, leathery second layer out. And then when you're ready to, there, that's the layer we want out. This is a little bit tough sometimes, so I remove that. There. And this gets put into my recycle bin. And this is how to slice the onion. You first cut it in half, and then you see how there are radials. See, that's, so you're going to cut it like this, 1, 2, and you're going like this, like a fan. That way, every slice will be uniform. And you go, this is vertical, and then as you go left, it begins to angle. And that way all your slices are the same size. We're going to heat that in my, I think I'll do it here. We'll take a tablespoon of olive oil. You know, I like to use oils that are proven to be healthy for you. Both olive oil and canola oil will reduce cholesterol. They are good for you. They are healthy. So don't be afraid of oils, so long as they're, you know, good oils that don't have any trans fats. Eat healthily. That's the best way to eat delicious food. Heat the 1 tablespoon of olive oil or canola oil, and then you cook the onion for about 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and then you'll add the tomatoes. And here's how you dice a tomato. We want to be in our kitchen so that we don't chop. We dice, slice. So you cut them in half and see how then you slice it horizontally, then vertically, and then you make your cubes, your dice, and they're all the same size. Like this. And then again, vertically. This won't matter too much because it will become mushy, but it matters that they're all uniform. For example, when you make pico de gallo, it matters because the mouthfeel is part of the enjoyment. And when you have all of the ingredients the same size, you have all of the flavors of the onion, the tomato, interacting together uniformly. So it's a much better flavor. And also, you want to make sure that everything is very fresh. I can't stand pico de gallo. That's stale. Pico de gallo has to be very, very fresh, and you want to get to the bottom of the bowl when you make pico de gallo, which is very similar in the combination of ingredients as this is. Tomatoes, onions are native to Texas. Almost every place on earth has onions. And I don't understand how they did arise all over the planet at the same time. But they are indigenous to Texas. We had onions before the arrival of the Europeans. The tomato is indigenous also to this part of the world. They're all Native American foods. So we put this, now that the onion has cooked a little bit, we add the tomato. And we'll cook that until the tomato is a little bit mushy and the onions begin to get more soft. The flavors are going to meld and they're going to burn a little bit, so the sugars are going to come out. That's why you cook these before the next step, which will be boiling the amaranth. But we want the sugars to come out, so we're going to burn them a little bit. Pièce de résistance. Here, you know, this is the molcajete. We're going to use the molcajete. And the molcajete is, of course, traditional. Every Mexican-American home has a molcajete or had a molcajete given to them. This belonged to my mother. And when you have a molcajete in your home, you never give it away. It never leaves your home. One of my nieces or nephews will have this when I'm gone. It's Volcanic Rock from Mexico. And when you first buy it, you have to cure it. And that means that the lava rock that is all around is going to fall off very easily, which you don't want. So you put about a tablespoon of white rice, and you mash the white rice, and then it'll turn gray. So you throw it out, and you keep doing this until the rice comes out white, and then it's cured. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a little spice. Sometimes we added this, sometimes not, but it's black pepper and just a tiny, tiny bit of garlic. And then you take this is called tejolote. In English, it's of course pestle. In Spanish, it's mano. But the indigenous word is tejolote. All that I'm doing here today is all indigenous to this land. And I would say that the communication between Texas and Mexico, Mesoamerica, is 10,000 years old. So everything really is very cohesive. So this is the way the molcajete goes. So you have to do it real fast, at least I do. I was on a radio show once, and I did this for the sake of the listeners to see if they could tell what it is. And I got a letter from a man in prison who said, it was an emotional letter. He said, "Mr. Medrano, I'm crying. That sound took me to my grandmother's kitchen, and all of the warmth that I felt, and it just made me cry because I realized how supportive my family is, and it just made me feel at home." So he thanked me. So the sound of the molcajete is also very, very, very important. We need a little bit of water in this for the spices. And then I'll add a little bit of salt, and we'll let it cook. The spices are ground into the stone, so you have to ungrind them, unpaste them from the stone using the pestle and the water. And that's the flavoring. Very, very delicate. You don't want to overpower it because you want to be able to taste the flavor of the amaranth. A little bit of salt. Then we add the amaranth. There we go. And then it's going to steep in all of those. See that lovely? Look at that. All the sugars are coming out, and the color is beautiful. And then we douse it with water, and then we'll cook it for about a half an hour. Keep adding water over time if it gets too dry, and you'll see over time the leaves will absorb all of the spices that we're using, the flavor of the onion and the tomato that has been a little bit caramelized because the starches turn a little bit into sugar. These techniques are ancient techniques. The Native Americans of Houston and Texas and northeastern Mexico, we did not do deep frying. So Tex-Mex is not our food. We had no deep frying at all. Boiling, stone boiling like this, and roasting are indigenous techniques. And and they're invented by women, by the way. Women are the caretakers of cooking technologies. Women domesticated the plants, they knew what the plants were, and they knew what the technologies for cooking were. So they invented stone boiling. Stone boiling is when you I'm going to start while I talk. I'm going to start with the next dish. This will cook for about 30 minutes where all the flavors blend, and then we'll have it. But while that's cooking, let me start on the next dish and continue explaining that stone boiling was they would make a hole in the ground, and then on the hole they would lay either hide or tree bark, and then of course it would be watertight, and then they would take hot rocks that were in a fire nearby, very, very hot, put them into the water as though this were a stone boiling bowl, and then that would make the water boil, and then you would add your spices, you would add your meats or whatever, and over time you would just boil it. So stone boiling is the great-great-grandmother of this. These are ancient techniques. Every time I cook in my kitchen, I know that I'm following in the footsteps of giant culinarians who, on this land, invented these technologies that I use. So I'm always very grateful for the past. That will do. That will do for that. Now, I'm going to, the next thing we're going to make is, we're going to make a dish that's also indigenous. It's a turkey dish, and turkeys are indigenous to Mexico. That's where the earliest remains of turkeys archaeologically are to be found. They were domesticated here in Houston when the Spaniards arrived. They had them in pens up in New Mexico, and so we're doing indigenous. We're doing turkey, and we're going to, again, spice it up with indigenous ingredients, onion, tomato, and we're going to add European imports, which is rosemary, bay leaf, garlic, and then something very special, which is the chipotle chile. In my book, I have a recipe for chipotle chile, but most people will buy it in a can. I like to make my own. It's a lovely infusion of rosemary, oregano, and other spices. Chipotle is a ripe jalapeno that has been smoked, probably mesquite, and then after it's smoked, it's rehydrated in spices and chiles. It's just lovely. So we're going to flavor the turkey with that. So let's start the process by making the tostadas. These are tostadas that are going to be filled with turkey, and then we'll have a salad on top. Corn is a woman-made product. About 9,000 years ago, a woman took a seed, a seed called teosinte, it was a grass, and melded it with another and created corn. It's woman-made. And the reason we say women is because historically women are in charge of cooking. They know the technologies. So they engineered this new product, and that's how we got corn. And then they realized that, by the way, this tortilla is not corn. This tortilla is very different from corn. This tortilla is made from nixtamalized corn, Nixtaml, nixtamalized. And about 4,000 years after the invention of corn, the women culinarians realized that corn is not very nutritious. It's delicious, and it's somewhat nutritious, but it's not enough to sustain life. Corn in its raw state, if you eat corn, you will not get niacin, which means you can die. Niacin is a chemical that we need. And so about 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, the women invent what they call nixtamalization. And they take the corn, the dried corn, and they add to it in a vat of boiling water. They add calcium chloride or potassium chloride, which is that white powder you get after burning wood. It's potassium chloride. They took that and they boiled the dry corn, and it becomes nixtamal. And you can sustain yourself on nixtamal because it's very high protein. The protein in the raw corn is not very digestible, but this protein from which this is made is very digestible, and it has niacin. So it sustained civilizations healthily for millennia. And you know, here's a reason why I'm glad we're doing this at the Botanic Garden, because the Botanic Garden is about education and culture, not just the product. It's not just a fetish with the product. And if you divorce cuisine from culture, cuisine has no legs. Now we're going to put this, as you notice, I did a light brushing of canola oil. You can use olive oil, because I want to forego the high fat of frying. I don't want to fry them. So then we bake this in a 400 degree oven. No, not 400, sorry, 350. 350. You want a low temperature because you want time for the moisture of the tortilla to dehydrate. You want all the moisture out so it's really, really crispy. So it's a lower temperature because then you have more time for the moisture to evaporate. Sorry, it's 350. And that'll cook for 15 minutes. And then we're going to fill the top of the tostada with our chipotle and some salad. It's a wonderful dish. And this is doing very, very well. So let's start with the filling for the tostadas. I'm going to use the blender. So we're going to have a lot of electricity and noise. I'm bringing it here. By the way, this is another invention that owes its existence to women. Because what I'm going to do, I could make in this, but of course, for restaurants, for big jobs, this will take too long. And so we're going to use a blender. This and this are related. This is the great-great-great-grandmother of this. So we're very thankful to the women who have preceded us. So for this, we're going to add onion and tomatoes, and then some spices. And again, we need more onion, so this is a very large onion. Normally I use white onion, that's more traditional. But if you have a yellow onion or one of these sweet onions, that'll work too, that'll be fine. Again, we do the same technique, you peel it. And as we did last time, you cut it in half. By the way, after you cut it in half, you'll notice that there are two sides. This is where the root is, right here. You can see the root. See that? And this has no root, so this is the top. So what happens is that the root, let me take this off, the root is what is holding all of the layers together. So you don't want to cut too far into here because then the root will stop holding it. So keep that in mind. That's a good way to keep your onion intact. I'm just going to do a little bit more. I think that's probably enough. And when you scrape make sure that you're not using the blade. Because you'll ruin your blade. Just use the back of the knife. So now we're going to add the ingredients that make it's called tinga, T-A-N-G-A. It's a recipe that's common in all of Mexico and South Texas. I want to take a large garlic clove. I mash it first, and that releases the peel, the skin. There we go. And then we're going to add our salt. We're just going to add the tomatoes very coarsely chopped. Here we do chop, just quartered actually is enough. And what I like about the Mexican and Texas cuisine is that we use everything. We use everything. I trained at the CIA, Culinary Institute of America, and the French have a technique called concasse, where you parboil the tomato and then you take the skin off. You peel it and then you take the seeds out, and it's a lovely little presentation of the tomato. But to me, I think once in a while if you want to do that, it's fine, but what's going to happen with the skin and the nutritious seeds? So we don't do that. We use everything. The next thing we want to do is add water so that the blender can work properly. And the main ingredient that will flavor it is the chipotle chiles. So there's one. Remember, these are smoked jalapenos that have been infused with a concoction of rosemary and other spices. And they're hot. They can be hot. Let me put some of the water, the liquid in it. There we go. And then we blend it. Simple as that. But it's fast. This is not a home blender. It's an industrial blender for restaurants. Most restaurants will have this, especially Mexican restaurants, because if you're doing salsas, if you're doing moles, you really want this. So this has really become a very Mexican. The motor, see that? You could run your lawnmower on this motor. I think that's enough. So we're going to add this to our turkey. And let me explain how you do that. Let me put this away first. When you notice that the turkey, tomate, cebolla, chile, chipotle, they're all indigenous to this area of the land and to the Americas, I think you get a sense of belonging that's really great. You know, a sense of belonging to this land where thousands of years ago, the people who stood here were eating the same, their bodies are being nourished in the same way that your bodies are nourished. I think that's wonderful. So we're going to add onion. Actually, I'm not going to add any onion. I'm just going to cook it. In Spanish, we say freír el chile, fry the chile. So it's a tablespoon of canola oil, and to that we will add we'll add the concoction that will cook. We have to let it cook for 20 minutes for the flavors to really come together. So we'll let that cook on high heat. And when it starts, ooh, this is turning on very nicely. What I'm doing today, I chose the basic flavors of tomate and cebolla because they're indigenous. And then you build upon that by adding layers of chile and spices. This is almost ready. You want to, after about 20, 25 minutes, you want to take one of the leaves and make sure that it's soft and that it's still not hard. And you want to bite into it, and like spinach, you want it to immediately dissolve in your mouth. We are ready to take out the chalupas, the tostadas. After 20 minutes, you want to take out the tostadas. The color of the tostadas has to significantly change. The darker the tostadas are, the crispier they are. If they're very light, they're going to be pliable and it's not a good crunch in your mouth. Remember, it's all about mouthfeel. This is a very sophisticated way of cooking. Everything in this, everything has to do with texture, with color, appearance, and flavor and aroma has to be just right. So these have to be really crispy. And these are ready. See how nice and golden they are? So let's add to our concoction. You know what? I think I'm going to put it into a larger container. This is the new concoction, and the oil is going to fry it a little bit. You always cook these, especially when you add chiles, and you'll notice the difference. If you taste it before it's cooked, it will taste green, and the flavors won't come together. It really has to cook. So we're almost ready. To this, we're going to add, I'm coming over, we're going to add some turkey, which I've parboiled already. As I said, turkey is native to this region. It was here long before the Spaniards arrived, the first. You take some turkey breasts and you poach them. You boil them really, but first you bring the water to a boil, and then you add the turkey. And when you add the turkey, the bubbles will subside. And then turn the heat down and just bring the bubbles up to barely bubbling, like barely simmering, and then let it cook that way. Because in the low temperatures, the turkey will be softer. The muscles, all that will be softer. So the meat will be more tender. So I'm going to, those tomatoes were very flavorful, so I'm taking some out. And what we do then, we add this, and it cooks only for 15 minutes. That's all. After it cooks, you let it cool, and then with your fingers or with a knife, you can slice it. Just make sure that you have threads. You know, it's really shredded. That's the concoction. To this, we have to add the aromatics, and this is where gardening is so important, because it's the aromatics. From the garden, we had the rosemary and the bay leaf. So we'll throw one bay leaf in here, and then I will mince the rosemary a little bit so that we get the flavor, but when you eat it, you're not biting into the little strands. think a little bit more. The chipotles that I put in there were cooked, were made with rosemary. So the flavoring of the rosemary is already in the chipotle chiles. But we just want to accentuate it a little bit. And you'll be able to taste and smell that lovely rosemary with the bay leaf. It really makes a big difference. So we let that sit for about 15-20 minutes. The flavors will combine and you're ready to serve it. So here is how you serve it. The thing about serving Mexican food, really all food, is to make it be very eye appealing, because you have a visual component to cooking that's very important. The eyes attract you to it. You get ready for it. Smell is very important. So all the senses are involved. Here is how we're going to serve it. We're going to top it with a little bit of lettuce that has been minced, just shaved very, very thin. This is iceberg lettuce. And then I'm going to add diced tomato. And here we dice it the same way that we did earlier. And making sure that the cubes, the dice, are all roughly the same size. So you don't have a big, you're eating and all of a sudden you have this big bunch of tomato skin in your mouth. It has to be very pleasant. Remember, it's all about mouth feel. When the tomatoes were first taken to Spain, they thought they were the devil's fruit. They did not like it. They thought it was a member of the nightshade family and therefore the devil's. They thought it caused diseases, but then they really liked them. So if you have gazpacho, of course it's tomatoes. So they fell in love with it after a while. And then we're going to have avocados. Let me get a bowl for the tomato. Now remember, use the backside of the spoon for the tomato. And here is how you slice an avocado. This is a little bit green. When you buy the avocado in the store, make sure that it's hard and green. Because if it's soft, you don't know how long it has been sitting there and it may have lost its prime moment of flavor. You buy it green, 2 days in your home, and then it's ready. Then when it ripens just to be a little bit soft, it's the fullness of flavor, and that's the best avocado you can get. Go like this, take it off, throw it away. I keep going out of the picture. And then what we're going to do today is we're going to slice it. Normally I would cube it. When you do guacamole, you hold it like this, and then you slice it like this, and then you slice it crosswise. You're making cubes. That's called I forget the terminology. So, but we're not going to do that because we're not making guacamole. We just want it whole so that I can easily slice it. Now, if you go to the store and they don't have green, hard avocados that you can bring home and wait, you scoop it out like that. Then what you can do is, see this little button? You take it off and you look in there, and if it's bright, bright green, then it's fresh. But if you take the button out and it's dark, then don't get it because it's old. And if Houston has a lot of avocado connoisseurs, all the buttons in the grocery stores of the avocados are going to be gone. There will be no more buttons in our avocados because they've all been tested by avocado connoisseurs. This is the avocado slices that will garnish the tostadas. I'm going to cut them in half like that, and there we go. We are ready. So let's make ourselves, I think we're ready to serve the dishes. You take your tostada and you fill it with the turkey. Tinga de guajolote is the name of the turkey in Spanish. And then, remember, it's about color. So that's the base. You add brightness with green, and then the tomato. And I use a little tiny spoon for this. Just on top. You don't want to overwhelm it because there's tomato in it, but the freshness of this tomato is a nice contrast with the sweetness of the cooked tomato. And then we'll take one of these and nestle it on top. If you want to, and if your doctor says it's possible for you, then you can add salt. You can add salt to the lettuce, to the tomato, and to the avocado before you put it. These are all very, very healthy dishes because you've reduced the fried fat. There is no cholesterol because we don't use any animal fats. When you plate, always plate by threes. One, it looks so solitary. Two, well, it's boring. It's not dynamic. Three, it's alive. You know, it's dynamic. So you could do five, I suppose, but three is a good number. So keep that in mind when you're plating things. There we go. That's done. Put this here. Put the tomato, and we'll add a little bit of this lovely nestled bright green avocado. And there you have your tostadas de tinga de guajolote. There you go. Now we're serving the guisado of amaranth. You will serve it. It's a delicious, very nutritious green. It's a side dish that you can serve with an outdoor cook or cooking like barbecue, but you can also serve it with any dish, poached chicken. You can even serve it with nopalitos. These are two indigenous dishes, indigenous to Texas, northeastern Mexico, and they come to us thanks to the creativity and persistence of women cooks who are Native Americans.